Your Archbishop in Washington, Wilton Gregory, recently became a cardinal, the first African American cardinal in church history. Can you talk about the meaning of this, especially in a year with such a focus on racial justice?
Oh, I found it a work of the Holy Spirit that through the Pope that in this year where we've seen where the ancient wound in this country has been suddenly brought to the front in a way that it needed to decades, centuries ago, where we've witnessed the ugliness has not died down but has continued. And then for this very providential appointment of one of the top papal advisors and an elector of the next pope to be an African American is, I think, one of God's ways of trying to heal us as a society, and through especially his church.
You produced a series on YouTube about the church and its teachings called Five Things with Father Bill Byrne. Here's a clip from one. It's called Five Things I Learned from My Dog.
Number one, the look of love. My dog Rue sees me on my best day and my worst day, and she always looks at me with love. And that's exactly the way God looks at me also, even more so, even more powerfully. Number two, Rue teaches me about forgiveness. You see, if I'm at a meeting and she has to stay at the house, she doesn't slam doors or get mad at me. She's so thrilled when she sees me. And that reminds me, I need to be a person of forgiveness. So Rue teaches me forgiveness. Number three, balance. Rue loves to walk, Rue loves to eat. I love to eat, I need to walk Rue. She helps me be balanced in my spiritual life.
I love that clip. So, what prompted you to create this series, and what five things should we know about you?
Well, what prompted me was it was started as a series of columns in the local Washington Catholic paper called the Catholic Standard. And then we decided to, myself and a guy named Christopher Baker, who used to work for the Archdiocese, he said, well, what an incredible opportunity this would be to translate it into a YouTube video. I lived during COVID. The seminary was closed, and I had three millennials move into my rectory, and so as we were at the end, we would be chatting, and they would be looking at their phones, staring at YouTube, and this is a magnificent way of reaching people, and that's what we have to do is translate the message into a way that people hear it. And that's what has happened since St. Paul started writing letters, and in every medium we've translated and enculturated the basic core of the gospel. Five things you should know about me. Number one, I'm the baby of a big family. And so I'm used to not feeling overly special. I think when you grow up in a one of eight, then you realize, okay, you need to work as a group in order for things to for people to get along and be happy. And another thing is I'm a priest, and I love being a priest. I've been a priest for 26 years, and I find myself more joyful now than I was 26 years ago, and I was pretty daggone joyful then. Number three is I'm a pastor at heart. The majority, 22 years of my priesthood has not been administrative, although I worked in the Archdiocese. All the while I kept living in a parish, which is the place where sort of the faith hits the road, and where the privilege of walking with people in their joyful times of getting married, and then the baby arrives, but then also when they have great tragedies, to be able to bring them the joy and peace that only comes from God. Number four, I would say I'm a chronically hopeful person. To say the glass is half full is an understatement. I believe even in this really weird and challenging year of 2020, that if we open our hearts and minds and our eyes, great things can happen. I always tell people, we're not getting back to normal. Let's get back to better. the lessons that we learned about our simplified lives and spending time with our families and walking a lot. I think all of these are sort of part of the blessings that we should be garnering because it won't last forever. And number 5 is that I am a believer. I'm a believer, and I'm thrilled that the Pope has sent me to this incredible part of the world in Western Massachusetts, to Hamden and Hampshire and Franklin and Berkshire counties, to walk with the people. One of the great things that Pope Francis teaches us is that we need to accompany each other in the faith, not drag people along or push them from behind, but walk with them from wherever they are, whatever their state of life, wherever they find themselves. Let's accompany each other to the good, to the beautiful, to the true, to God.
Is your dog, is it Rue, still with you?
No, Rue is now in heaven. She's in the owner's box for the ordination with my dad. But Zelly is my current dog. She's a 2 3/4-year-old black Labrador retriever who is an evangelization machine. She draws people. She's a very sweet dog. And I've told the pastors when they invite me, they better invite Zelly because she draws a crowd. It's going to her head a little bit, her celebrity status here in Western Massachusetts, but we're working on humility as a virtue for her.
Well, you know that the diocese and your predecessors have said over and over that they regret the sexual abuse committed by clergy members and the failure of the diocese to protect their parishioners. And yet it seems every year we hear of new accusations and new problems with how investigations were conducted. How are you going to be able to hold the diocese accountable?
This is a number one priority of mine because we cannot get to healing until we get to transparency and communications. We did a survey before I was even thinking that I would be going to Springfield Diocese to Western Massachusetts. And the message came back clear. We need we need better communication, and we need transparency. So although I'm not yet bishop until next week, I've already directed our staff to start working on getting this information out and releasing the names so that true healing can begin. It's not a luxury; it's an absolute necessity to be able to provide people with the information that they need so that we can begin to bring healing. Most importantly, to the victims. I have never been a bishop before, but I have been in parishes for 26 years, and I've seen the devastation that our failure to be truthful, what it does to people. The parish priest is the front line, and the vast majority of parish priests are good, holy, kind, hardworking men who have lived chaste lives, and yet we're the face of this to the people, and the people deserve better. You know, the truth sets us free, and if we ever want to bring healing, especially to victims, that's what we have to do. So, so I think people could expect some clear information coming sooner than later as we begin to prepare the release of names.
That survey that you referred to, is that the online survey that was done by the independent task force that was asked for by the former bishop?
Yeah. So the independent task force, one of the results of that was to hear what people have to say, and it fits exactly with my own theology. And my theology is that the Holy Spirit doesn't just talk to a bishop, doesn't just talk to the priest. The Holy Spirit talks to all the faithful, and unless we begin to start learning how to listen, then we won't be able to fully hear how God speaks to us. And the survey is on the website of the diocese, and the message has come through consistently and clearly. that this is where the Lord is calling us.
Well, the survey did show indeed support for how the diocese has acknowledged the impact of clergy sexual abuse. But it also mentioned that a significant number of those surveyed did not view the church's response as timely and compassionate. How do you expect to change that view?
Well, I mean, I think it's actions, not words. You can talk all you want, and you can say all you want, but unless we're reading about it, unless we're learning about it, unless it's published, um, then we can't really begin to build trust in any meaningful way. And that's why we've already started working on this. There are really excellent, committed people in the church working on this to make sure that we do build trust. But it's more than just building trust. It's about bringing healing. And I think the lack of trust is a symptom of something much deeper, and that's of the hurt that people experienced through both the abuse of the clergy that victimized others, albeit a small number compared to the number of good priests, but then the systematic failure over the last decades to address it properly and to make sure that we weren't just trying to avoid scandal, but we were trying to stop what was wrong and begin to do the right thing.
Is that going to be your number one priority, addressing that lack of trust?
Yeah, I mean, my number one priority is to preach the gospel. And that is the gospel right now, is that Jesus Christ is desiring that we be a people of truth. How can we be preachers of a faith if it's not perceived or experienced as true? Or the teller of the tale is not one to be trusted. And so how do people believe things? They believe it not just because it rings true in their hearts, but they trust people to tell them about it. And that's not me, that's Aquinas. But that idea of the teller of the tale. And for 2,000 years, we've been without fail preaching the truth of the gospel and the resurrection. And so that, with that in mind, we need to regain our own ethos, as rhetoricians will describe it, so that we have the believability of the teller of the story. We have that capacity, and we have so many people that are doing this each and every day, laymen and women and clergy alike.
I know that this is not your first visit to Massachusetts. You went to school at Holy Cross, but this is a relatively new region for you. How have you gone about trying to learn about Western Massachusetts, and did anything surprise you?
Well, having had experiences of it 30, well, I wish it was 30 years ago. It's more than that. But I graduated in 86, the 30 some odd years. Then there's a delay. You get a call from the Pope's representative, the Apostolic Nuncio. And there was a delay of almost 2 weeks where I couldn't tell anybody. And so my next exposure was every surreptitious secret moment, Googling different parts and learning about the Berkshires and plotting my outings with Zelly to go and meet people. And so it's amazing when you're not allowed to talk to people, how much information you can garner about a place. And what a beautiful place for the Lord to have called me. And I tell you, I'm just excited about being here. And the experience of Western Massachusetts is there's a pride of place, and there's a sense of people's love of where they are from. That this is not a place that's in reference to any other big cities, or but actually is its own beautiful spot on the globe, and people are proud of that. And I also think that the my experiences, and maybe I'm overgeneralizing, and if I am, then please tell me. But I think as you move farther west in Massachusetts, people get nicer and nicer and nicer. But that's just an observation that I'm saying about my new neighbors.
I don't think that's a generalization, but we could be mistaken anyway.
You might be a little, Kari, you might be a little biased
Just a little
yourself.
biased. Well, as you drive around, you'll see quite a few empty church buildings, some in very prominent locations in Western Massachusetts communities. Have you been briefed on the diocese's? Have you been briefed on the diocese's efforts to sell these churches and get them developed?
I am not as familiar with that. There's the flood of information is about 5 fire hoses at once, especially when I was announced October 14th. So it really has only been, just under 2 months. So I have been concentrating on our child protection, concentrating on making sure that our priorities are established. I also see that dwindling participation is not just sad, it's also an opportunity. There's a whole generation that is not familiar with the message of Jesus Christ. And that is that love will always conquer hate, that life wins. And this is a radical message that I feel privileged to bring along with the people here who have been doing this for their whole lives, of being able to bring that message. And I expect people to respond.
You mentioned that dwindling sort of attendance that has also led the Springfield Diocese to close a number of schools in recent years. My understanding, though, is that enrollment has increased somewhat due to the diocese offering in-person classes during the pandemic. My question is, how will you be able to sustain that given the available financial aid that remains limited?
Well, when your numbers go up, so does your income. So nothing succeeds like success. And I expect that when people begin to start experiencing what they are experiencing now, the investment that you make, not just in in-person classroom education, but actually seeing that we have the capacity to educate the whole person. We don't just take care of their brain or get them out in the fields for gym. We also educate the spirit. We form the spirit. So we are mind, body, and spirit. So we are able to help the whole person, the whole kid, grow to their fulfillment. And we don't have to pray in Catholic schools. We actually get to pray. And that experience of developing our spirit and joining each other. If we want to know what's going to end a pandemic of hatred and racism and ugliness in our culture, it's that. It's getting people in a room together to pray, to laugh, to run around and have fun on the playground, and then have the excellence of a Catholic education. Many of our teachers could be teaching anywhere, and yet they're making the risk right now of being in a Catholic, in a person, but they also are mission driven, and not just for education, but for faith-based education. And so they're able to create vibrant and safe and exciting learning experiences that I'm convinced when now that parents have experienced it, they'll say, oh, wait a second, this is worth every penny.
You mentioned education, and of course, part of your YouTube, getting back to the YouTube series that you produced, was about educating people about the church and its teachings. Do you plan on continuing that, or is that sort of a one-time series and done with?
Oh, no, I want to get back to it because we've got, I've got to get ordained next week, and make sure my mom has a good time. My mom is 97 and is coming up. She and still lives by herself. Isn't that amazing? She is having had 8 kids, and you know why I think she's in such good shape? I read an article years ago that said that if you're a woman who has a child in your 40s, you have a substantially better chance of living to be 100. And my mom had me in her early 40s. So the reason she's in such awesome shape is because of me, I think. Because she had me in her 40s, and her friends were all moving to Florida to go play golf, and she was going to Cub Scout meetings. So I think that's part of the equation. But then we get through Christmas, and then once we hit the new year, then we can start making some good resolutions. And one of them is to make sure that we continue to communicate with people in this through these other media.
Especially now during this pandemic, huh?
Yes, and one of the things that we found very successful in Washington, and I don't know about, I haven't been familiar, was we had a regular radio presence. So I'm all about radio, Kari, okay?
Thank you so much. Does your mother still watch the series on YouTube?
Oh yeah, she watches. I mean, she's not quite as great with the phone, but as long as it's sent to her in a text, she can access it.